Hi, I'm Stacey St. Clair with Soulstream Media. Thank you for joining us on our YouTube podcast. Please remember to like, share, subscribe, and share this with someone that might enjoy it that you know. Today, I have a special guest, Carrie Klewin Lawrence. She is a stage director, strategic storytelling expert, author, and personal branding coach. Carrie works with entrepreneurs, creatives, and business leaders to overcome imposter syndrome, clarify core values, and create personalized measures of success. That means Carrie helps people tell their story and to clarify their story in order to achieve their goals. And I have had the pleasure of reading her book, Origin Story. And I want to go deeper with Carrie today on something that she wrote in her book, the statement, who you are meant to be becomes who you are. Carrie, welcome back to Soulstream Media. And tell us what you mean by that. Who you are meant to be becomes who you are. And then we're going to go deeper on evolution versus reinvention.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Stacey. I'm so excited to be able to continue our conversation. This topic of evolution is something that I think about a lot. And yeah, that statement that you just read is really at the core of Origin Story. That knowledge, that intuition, that gut feeling of this is what I want, right? Those decisions that we made along our journey to say, are we going to the path on this side or that side? How do we make those decisions? It's really, if we're open to listening to ourselves and prioritizing that voice, then we have found ourselves in unexpected places, right? Based on who we know we really are. And when I talk about evolution versus reinvention, not to dismiss, a lot of people like to talk to themselves about reinvention, but I caution people to do that because reinvention speaks to a type of starting from ground zero, which means nothing, clean slate, blank page. And we can't actually do that, right? You cannot. One of the images, the metaphors that I like to work with is the phoenix. Even when the phoenix burns, the phoenix reemerges. The phoenix does not turn into a turtle, right? So in thinking about what we pick up and carry forward into the future and what we leave behind, that is an evolutionary process. And I think the more we can embrace that process and give ourselves grace to grow and change and not have to try to wipe the slate clean and say nothing was worth it, that is what I really encourage, that other mindset of actually I'm here in this moment because of everything happened. Not that I want to carry all of that with me to the future, but just the acknowledgement of that part of the process.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of women, as certainly my age, coming up on 60 years old, who are wanting, there's just a lot of reinvention going on. And I feel like a lot of it is starting with the external. They want to lose weight, get physically fit, change careers. The dating thing starts, divorce happens, and the dating and the reinventing with just like with weight loss and hair and things like that. But as we both know, that probably isn't so sustainable. Yes, we can. I mean, I have a new hairstyle. I lost weight after my divorce, but I think what you help people with is more of the inner evolution.
So what I'm really talking about and listening to you explain it is a type of recentering, right? So we maybe something is challenging us in our lives and we think, how can I get through this or how can I achieve that goal? Well, then often we turn to how can I be like someone else? Or how can I follow their path? Or, losing weight or whatever, the job, climbing the ladder, how do I do that without paying attention to those signals, those red flags or even yellow or orange flags, right, that are happening, that are saying you're leaving your center. You're exploring something that maybe is causing you to feel like your integrity is being called into question, right? You're not holding on to those core values. And then what I see often happening is people have kind of followed that good advice, that leadership, right? That guru of sorts. And then all of a sudden they're in a place that they don't recognize themselves, right? And so
And
then
that maybe is when we feel the imposter syndrome because our insides haven't caught up maybe with our outsides.
right, right. And so taking that time to then say, okay, I'm not comfortable here. So let's look at where we came from, how we got to where we are, and the choices that we made along the way. And also sorting out at the same time some of those core values. Have I strayed away? Have I let money dictate my decisions to a place where I am really thinking about it in a very transactional way and not pursuing my passions as a result of that? There could have been cases of survival, as you mentioned, like a traumatic experience, caretaking, divorce, even choosing to go back for a educational degree. All of those things could be a matter of survival and making it to that next level. But we are then sometimes caught in systems, whether it's legal or educational or other types of things that can also challenge our notion of who we really are and come into conflict and create tension around those core values.
It's such a journey of I've I'm gonna call it I wanna ask you about that, who we really are. You state it like we know who we really are, where I feel like the journey has that.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay. So my part of the work that I do,
People that when they come to you, they know who they are?
yes,
Think okay.
yes, but not consciously.
Okay, big differentiation.
Yeah, I totally
You help us get to that, yeah, authentic who are we?
Yeah. So part of the work that I do is finding that evidence. And it's a very, very individual journey for everyone in thinking about those stories and the way that you handled this particular situation, how your character was revealed, the choices that you made that seemed wrong or regret is a big one. Okay, so if we talk about evolution and regret, if you everyone has moments where they did something, said something, found themselves in a situation that they maybe looked back and said, oof, I would have done things differently, right? So what I would do is sit down and walk someone through that decision making to add context, right? Because sometimes we look backwards with no context. My mother never let me, we had to sell the piano, so I never got to pursue my dream of becoming a piano player. Well, when you start to unpack that and think about a single mother who needed to move to get a better job, and you start putting these pieces together, right? Then you start to reevaluate and understand your own story and your own self even more. So it's a matter of kind of reconciling all of these actions and your character and kind of a little bit of stepping out of that to look at the big picture to say, hey, I've been demonstrating these interests, these passions, and these values for a long period of time. And so then it's a process of figuring out, okay, how am I going to carry that forward into the next job, the next relationship, the next place to live, those kinds of decisions.
That's amazing. I love that distinction between let's go a little deeper, the distinction between evolution and reinvention. I feel like we just covered some of it. Can you go a little deeper for us on your one on one, how you would help someone get to that more authentic identity,
Sure.
knowing that, like I said, do they know who they are when they come to you and you're like, yes, subconsciously though. So how do you get us to reveal ourselves consciously and connect with that authentic version of ourselves?
Okay. So when I walk people through, and when I talk about that, again, I'm not saying that reinvention isn't a good term. I just challenge people to think about what they mean by that. What do you mean by reinvention? You mean like, I'm going to just pretend like nothing, like that life didn't happen. I'm going to move states and change my name. And,
Yeah, I
I
think
haven't,
we're running I
right?
think we're yeah, it's good to that's funny you say that because 'cause I'm living, like, 5 states from where I've changed my name, letting go the ex-husband's name, it's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
do a lot of inner work to even get to the point where I would want to drop my ex-husband's name because I was hanging on. I had the opposite, like, I was hanging on to the old version of me in my life because I didn't wanna let go. I didn't want to go on a new journey or adventure. I was very felt very safe in my happily ever after that
yeah.
I thought we were living. So
And this is
really
a perfect
interesting.
example. Yeah, this
Yeah.
is actually a perfect example because you're talking about identity, right? And you're
Mhm.
talking about making a choice of what you're going to carry forward. This is such a perfect example because
Yeah,
you
go ahead, use me again as an example. You have so much great material.
also changed my name. I changed my name legally when I went to graduate school for a number of reasons. Because as an artist, I wanted a stage name. There was someone who had a similar name. They were high profile on the internet. And I was like, I'm unique. I want to be represented in a unique way. I took my mother's maiden name and loved it. And then I got married and had that whole struggle. So that's where the Lawrence comes from. So I totally understand. I've had many conversations with myself. So, how do you make a decision? How do you make a decision?
I'll just interject that I thought of like, what is my name going to be? I didn't want to go back to my maiden name was real German, kind of harsh. I was like, oh, I don't want that energy anymore. And then, so I thought, but I did look back in my ancestry for there's a cool name, Valentine, and that didn't quite sit right. It was really cool, and that ancestor was very strong, cool story. But it ended up that my cousin on my birthday last summer put into AI, what's a great surname for this Stacy with these attributes and personality traits she put in, and it came back with like a whole list, and St. Clair really jumped out at me. And then there was more validation just a few days later after I'm like, that one I really like. Then there was some spiritual validation a few days later, which I'm like, hello, I should have thought of that the first time I heard St. Clair, but anyway, it was very organic, I feel like meant to be process.
Okay, so you're just like you're answering the question yourself. But I'm going to highlight the process part of that and how I help people very similarly work through a question like that, which is you had an instinct, you felt uncomfortable about a decision that you had to make. You went and did the research. You gathered evidence from your own life. You went out and did some historical or some you interrogated the meanings of things, maybe even the meaning of, when we name children, we look at their names and the meaning and looking for signs of, spiritual signs or in the universe or a flower with a similar name just appeared or something, right? We look for these signs, we gather evidence, and then you said, I'm just going to elevate your own words, it jumped out at me. Okay, what does that mean? It jumped out at you. It connected with you on an intuitive level that this is the right answer, right? At some point, you had done all of the work so that you knew when you were offered the right choice, you knew the answer already. So you do know yourself, right? Because you cleared out a lot of other options. That was a process of discovery, exploration, and ultimate crafting, creativity. So you created your own story, but it's yours. It's uniquely yours. You did all of the work. And that is exactly how I encourage people to engage in a difficult decision making process because that name you're not going to carry into the future. And it is part of your story, right?
Yes, I love it. So who you're meant to be, that's our inner voice that I'm hearing now. You're saying that inner voice
Yeah.
is who knows who we're meant to be. And
Right.
that's where the who we know who we are with that inner voice.
Yes.
And then by listening to that inner voice, we become.
You were always Stacey St. Clair.
Yeah.
I will just put that out there, right? And you now have achieved that, right? Now, whether that's really just the name or the identity that you are now living in, this was always going to happen to you, is what my argument.
I know, I do believe that. I do believe it. And I'm think now I'm grateful for everything, every traumatic thing we think are traumas, and sometimes and a divorce feels traumatic and businesses collapsing feels traumatic, things, losses, other people, dying, they are traumas and
Yeah.
but
Well, can I speak
and
to
I
that?
know enough now that when one's going down, I'm like, okay, this is going to take me deeper into who I am. And this is, there's a bit of a welcoming. There really was in 2020 when my husband said he filed for divorce. I was like, whoa, this is going to be really transformational, which was my first thought. And there was almost gosh, a wanting it, that transformation.
Yeah. So I do talk a little bit in the book about when we have wounds, trauma creates wounds in many different ways, sometimes actually quite literally physically. And it's a process of coming, you know, it's a process of moving through and letting the wounds heal. And that's different for every person. And then when the wounds become scarred, when the wounds become scars, that's when we have a little distance and can see their purpose and not trying to diminish, but trying to understand them as parts and pieces of that journey. So the scars then have stories, right? Have you ever sat down with someone and said, "Oh, where'd you get that scar? Oh, where'd you get this scar?" Or, and then the comparison starts because we in the storytelling we develop community and connections, and that can usually only happen from a place where the wound has already become a scar.
Yes, because otherwise we're just in the drama telling of the current story, which I did for a couple years, just, talk about
But
it.
that was
And
your process, right? That was your process of getting
wow.
to the scar, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think, for me, it triggered everything I had not healed yet. Abandonment, the deep, deep abandonment, fear and insecurity. How am I going to take care of myself now? My happily ever after retirement plan in my mind, being married and retired. It wasn't meant to be, And yeah, there was, though, I will remember that moment forever. A welcoming is a better word, a welcoming of the transformation, like
Yeah.
on a soul level. Since we're soul stream media, we'll talk on a soul level. But it was like ripping Velcro as many of us go through, something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I will offer that sometimes there is comfort in the discomfort. There is a sense of community around the discomfort as well, right? So so one of the things that I talk about is that evolution breaks the cycle, right? So if sometimes we can get into a cycle, we can get into a habit, we can get into a story that we're telling ourselves that we want to escape from. And sometimes it is conscious, sometimes it's not. And looking at all of the pieces, puzzles, and evidence can help us to break that cycle so that you are not living in that place of the wound anymore. You are moving forward. And not to say it's ever healed because it's not. There is a scar, right? There is a story, but it's our perspective and point of view about that being part and allowing it to have its place in the story that can help us move forward and not get stuck in that cycle.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And you said, did you say it takes what it takes? I mean, it just took what it took, and it took me about 4 years. But I'm so glad I stayed the course.
Yeah.
I kept going. Like we hear all the time, supportive, just like keep going, but keep going, doing the deeper work and healing. And yeah, I want to just share with all of our listeners, do keep going, do the work, do tune into Soul Stream Media. And there's just a plethora of other supportive, programs and teachers like Carrie here that can help us through these, trying times, things we didn't see coming.
Yeah. And I will say that, some people never escape the cycle. Some people never are in a place where they can speak from a scar instead of a wound. And it is scary. It's uncomfortable, which is one of the reasons that I decided that I wanted to do this work because people sometimes need a companion, they need a sounding board, they need a mirror for the process and somebody to help them untangle because sometimes we don't hear ourselves loud enough. So, my job is to deep listen and pick up on clues that you might not be consciously aware of as you are moving through that process because that that discomfort of growth and change can really be overwhelming and daunting. And when you have a coach, facilitator, companion in that process, then it can make it a lot more palatable so that you can withstand it because it can be overwhelming. Your identity and coming into a place of reconciliation. It also happens, I will say this, Stacey, that it doesn't always happen around something traumatic. It also happens when you achieve your dreams. It's a crazy notion to think that a dream achieving can be a reconciliation that is also overwhelming. And
Yeah, no, been there, done that. I mean, I
yeah,
think part of the demise of my marriage was both sold our companies and great, you think, retired to a quiet farm.
right.
We have two powerhouse people retiring to a 50-acre farm in
Uh-huh.
the country, like overnight. It was like silence, and yeah, I think I went a little like, what's next? When I sold my company, I found the farm because I had 6 months of nothing to do. So my new mission became, oh, I'm going to find our dream property. And
Yeah.
so then we get there to the dream property. Then what? It
Okay.
was,
So
and I had my new thing. I kind of knew what I was gonna do, but yeah,
yeah.
my husband did not have his new thing.
Well, we're used to the struggle. We're used to the challenge. We're told that that is the way life is, right? We don't talk very much about what happens when dreams and reality become aligned, right? It can be very scary and it's not a familiar feeling for most people. So I talk about that as resolution. Like I use the story, basic story structure and like at the climax of the story there's a struggle, there's reversal, there's recognition. I know what I need to do. You act on that. And then it's like that sliding doors moment of boom. And then you're like, this is a scary place. I'm uncomfortable with these. Not uncomfortable because you are still struggling, but uncomfortable because happiness might look different than you imagine, right? And comes with its own new set of challenges and decision making and that kind of thing as well. So, you know, this work is also in gratitude, appreciation, looking at that story to say, oh, well, this goal that you have had might not have happened in the way that you wanted to, but look at the rest of your life that you have carved out, right? And really looking at your personalized measures of success. For me, it comes into play with my partnership. My relationship with my husband, which is a true partnership, my three children, a house, all of these things. And career is one part of that. It's not the whole story, right? So where things might be really humming along in one area and not so much in another, it's like, oh, but you know what? There is balance. And so that kind of happiness sometimes is hard to recognize. And that's part of the work we have to do as well.
Wow, yeah, that's another amazing perspective you have, Carrie. You're so great. I love the different perspectives you bring because I have been in for 22 years the very specifically healing and transformation, which you're doing, but you have an amazing, a different way of connecting that.
Thank you.
Love it. Okay. Anything else you want to share with the Soulstream Media viewers before we wrap this one up? And we'll have you back, definitely. This was a lot. to
Yeah. I mean, when it comes this part of storytelling and evolution, there's a phrase, don't throw baby out with the bathwater, right? We don't want to just like chuck it out the window. And that's what I feel that people mean a lot of times. It's not, I don't want any of that anymore. There's a there's a well-known fact that there are certain trees, I think it might be redwoods, you probably know more about this. They need the fire to
Yeah.
germinate the seed, to crack the
Well, all
seed,
of them do. All the
right?
forests do. Yeah.
Right? They need the fire. So if you can get yourself to a place where you're embracing not the hurt of the fire, not that, but that it is a necessary part of the process in order to move towards the future. I think that it's hard work, but I am very excited to do it because I love helping people see their story in a different way with new perspective.
Thank you for being such an amazing resource for people. This is great. So we'll have you back in about a month. Everyone keep tuning in, and we're just going to go deeper and deeper on this topic of origin story, telling our story, changing our story, reinventing, evolving. It's
Yes.
going to be an ever evolving story.
Amazing.
And thank you for tuning in, Soul Stream Media viewers. Subscribe and share with someone today's show if you know someone they're in the throes of it and they need support around their evolution.
Thank you for having me. See you soon.
Thanks, Carrie. And everyone, check down below. There'll be a link to Carrie's website